Hello everyone and welcome back to Misc mixing and mastering tutorials on YouTube. I'm your host David, and as you know, if you've been following this series, I recently rebuilt the main studio computer, updated the DAW and cleaned up the plugin closet, so to speak. So I took the chance to list for you guys some of my favorite plugins for this past 2017 and still going strong starting 2018. My old favorites along with some tricks on what my main use is for them and what I like them for. And some of the new ones I either just got or still testing. In this video we'll look at everyone's favorite categories, saturators and distortion, called the harmonic category in Pro Tools, and also exciters and special effects, utility plugins and any other plugin that I like and doesn't really fit in a specific category. Before we start, let me remind you that we now have the Misc store where you can find t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and if our videos are helping you in any way and you want to support the channel, you can do that by visiting the store and get some cool gadgets. Link in the info box down below. Your support is very much appreciated. For saturators, I cannot for the life of me name one or two favorites, because of the very program-dependent nature of saturation and how very different the algorithms on different saturators are. And not only that, but there are so many kind of saturation. You can saturate with tube transformers, digital, bit crushing exciters, and many other types of processors. So these are in random order, and I'll just name on what I usually use these saturators on. But believe me, on tomorrow's mix, one can be swapped for the other at any moment. So, first one. I'll go with one that is both extremely versatile and good sounding. With multiband capabilities is Ozone Exciter module. This one is pretty close to be a one-stop shop saturator for what I intend as a mixing saturation. So subtle to middle of the road saturation, the kind of I use the most in my mixes and on most elements. My favorite slot for this one is bass. It's probably ended up in 90% of my basses. It's just great at bringing up the growl without smushing the tone or the low end, given the multiband option, but funny enough, the way it saturates the very low end is one of the reasons I love this one so much. Many saturators are great in the mid and high region, but kinda fail at enhancing the low end without destroying it. This one can do that. Can enhance the low end without destroying it, and it does it very well. Also fantastic on pianos and vocals. For me, the multiband options is always on pretty much. Triode is probably my favorite algorithm, but all of them are good, and I use them all. Usually I'm pretty high on the amount sliders, but keep in mind that my gain staging going in is usually very conservative, and I'm dosing it then with the mix sliders. Most work is done on the two mid bands, but like I said, the very low band is great. If I had to have only one, this would probably be it. Next up, for less subtle saturation and more for special effects distortions on vocals or parallel guitars and synths, is MacDSP Fuzzbox. Not only a really wide variety of algorithms and different distortions, but also a very useful filter section to box in frequency-wise the distorted material. The simulation of objects like phones, TVs, vehicles, toys, earbuds, containers of various materials, you name it, it's there. Make this one such a never-ending fun when it's time to make distorted and filtered vocals or anything else really. I love it not only in insert for direct effect on the material, but actually this is the way I often use this. It's one of the most inspiring plugins for me. Next one is the good old lo-fi, the old version. Stock Pro Tools for kicks and snares is still top 3 for me. Kicks and snares are the elements I use it the most, very subtly on kicks, both subtly and set to stun on snares. If I use it subtly, is usually an insert on the snare, but I very often have a parallel channel set on stun to really smash the snare and bring up a lot of sustain, grit and detail. Occasionally I use it on vocals too, on some groups like synths, but for the most part, kick and snare. I almost never use the saturation knob, always the distortion, and I also very often lower the sample rate just to darken things. Many times works better than EQ for me. Two quick and easy ones that we've seen in the previous episodes, the Sound Toys Devil Lock and the Little Radiator. They were both free when I got them, and they are among my favorites when I want just some more grit and aggression. Little Radiator, I cannot for the life of me find any track where it doesn't work. Whether it's drums, synth, guitars, bass, bagpipes, trombones, the settings you see is my default and I rarely touch it. Feels like cheating. The Devil Lock is a lot more heavy-handed and I usually use it in parallel on effect returns and on parallel drums. Next, the free Tritic Crush that we've seen in the first episode is one of my newest and it jumped on top of my list since day one. Capable of both heavy distortions and crush, is also surprisingly good at subtle saturation with the drive knob. Many features on this one for modulation. This plugin is what made me start modulating saturation and distortion, which I wasn't doing before, and I love it for that. Very deep in its simplicity, it has many controls, but at the same time, it's so very easy to set up and use. I really like it. It's free, so if you don't have it, go grab it. Next, I'm still testing it, and I still don't really know how to use it, but I'm impressed with the unfiltered audio indent and dent 2. More for special effects for me, very random modulated distortion. I think of this one for more over-the-top obvious effects, even though in my tests ended up being tucked in parallel, probably because I'm not too familiar with it yet, and I'm not familiar enough to pinpoint sources where I would use this on. It crushes materials and mangles it. So it could really be anything I want to crush and either make an obvious effect or return it in parallel. Next, FabFilter Saturn definitely is up there. This one is so deep. Between the multiband option and the different types of saturation is another one that is close to be a one-stop shop. But for some reason, I use this one way less than others. Probably because it does require a bit more fine-tuning for me, for it to work. Clean and warm tube and clean and warm tape are the algorithms that I use on this one. Never really the others. Maybe the gentle saturation. I like this one for vocals and acoustic instruments in general, but it can be great on bass and drums too, and also on full mixes or even mastering when used conservatively. And I'ma stop here with saturators strictly because I named them all, and I really like them all. I really feel like you cannot have enough saturators, because you never know what will work and on what. Even the saturation on Sound Toys Echo Boy, for example. I don't have it here, but there are so many saturation algorithms inside that delay, and it's a delay, and they sound so good. And also that reminds me to mention the Sound Toys Decapitator, which is another great one. Then I won't name any specific, but you also know that I use pedals for saturation and distortion on many things, from synths to drums, vocals and bass. So any good amp sim is a whole set of tools for that. Either pedal simulations or amp simulations are good options to experiment. And remember, many plugins that aren't advertised as saturators do have a saturation stage in them, which can really be sometimes the best choice for a given track. Take for example the clip function in the alpha compressor, which is one of my little dirty secrets for drums, as we've seen in previous videos. Also, that reminds me to send a message to URS plugins. Please port your URS saturator plugin in AAX for Windows. We will crowdfund it if needed. I'm not joking. Few exciters now which still fall into the category of saturators somehow. Waves Vitamin. I don't use exciters so often, but this one is probably the only one that I like for mids and highs. It's program dependent and it blends nicely with the material. I think it's best suited for synths, electric and acoustic pianos, but also for vocals occasionally, and just acoustic instruments in general. I usually only touch the high mid and the top end sliders really, and in a very conservative way, but it's very efficient, very good on background vocals too, to give it shines, and on vocal doubles too. The next one is free, or it was at some point. In my opinion, the best plugin ever made by Slate Digital, the Revival. Nice, warm, subtle growl in the thickness knob and really nice top end in the shimmer knob. I love it on drums and vocals, both highs and lows. And I like the shimmer on effects returns like delays, stereo doubles and reverbs. And it's also good on the entire mix sometimes. It's really a nice plugin. I usually have to get a hold of myself and limit the use to 2 or 3 elements max in a mix because it's easy to want to put it on more stuff when you first open it, but then you always regret it the next day. It's usually the case with exciters, but at least a couple of these for me are on every mix. Next up is an old one but still strong, and for me, maybe because I'm used to it, still better than anything in the category. The Waves Max Bass. Amazing to beef up a lot, and I mean a lot, of things. Vocals and snares first, but bass too, killer on some electric guitars, even very rarely on full mixes, but really try it on anything that you want to thicken a bit. I usually never touch anything but the max bass slider, never usually go over 0 with it, and then the frequency obviously. Once I found the right spot, which usually takes 2 seconds, I play with a high pass for the harmonics and you're set, instant thickness. Honorable mention to the soft tube saturation knob, which is free. I wish it had an output knob, but it's free, can't complain, sounds great. Some utility plugins now. The first one is a no-brainer. Hands down, the most useful utility plugin ever. Blue Cat Patchwork not only allows us to use VST in Pro Tools, which is fantastic, but the new version also has a bunch of built-in processors, a lot of them, delays, beat crusher, effects, modulation, compression, EQ, stereo manipulation tool, and even mid-side matrix decoders. This plugin allows you to build chains of plugins in one slot. Save presets, now it has a resizable GUI, parallel capabilities, everything. This plugin is just amazing. And its effects, the built-in effects, actually sound really good too. Superior Drummer 3. I will do a whole series on this one, something I've been wanting to do since it came out, but it will come. What can I say? This plugin is the only drum module you will ever need. With this version, Toontrack just put everything one could possibly need to build and mix drums. This replaced for me everything else. It can trigger from MIDI, it can transform audio to MIDI, and I don't produce, guys, I mix with this thing. It doesn't matter if it's a real acoustic drum or electronic or a combination of both that I'm given, I will undoubtedly, 100% every time add my own samples. And while before I had a large collection of drum samples taken here and there, with the stack function and the sounds this module has, I got rid of everything and I only exclusively use this one now. Every time it's so easy and fun to make my own samples, stacking snare sounds or kick sounds and ambience. The room sounds on this thing are insane. Nowadays you have to really have a top-notch studio, a top-notch recording engineer, drum sets, and drummer to even come close to what this module gives you. And even if you have all of that, it's a debate if it's gonna come out better right off the bat. The sounds on this thing are really crazy. So anything drums for me is Toontrack Superior Drummer 3 is it, hands down. Like I said, I will show you things with this one and how you can load your own samples in it, not just the one the module comes with or its expansions. You can load your own wave samples too. And I'll show you how I trigger real drums with this one using the drum tracker to add samples to, well, real drums. And it sounds incredibly good every time. A good free utility one is the OFA Fader Meter and MS Pan. Good tool for stereo balancing, metering, and just if you need a more advanced channel fader, it's free, just grab it. Some gems are also in the Creative Collection from Air. So many times these plugins are underrated somehow, but want a weird one? Then Air Spectral it is. I still have to understand what this thing does. I'm not ashamed to say I'm not even trying to understand it. This one is one of the few cases in which I just open it, twist the knobs, and wait for something strange to happen, and it does, every time. Also, the saturation filter and the diffuser delay are two really cool ones from Air still. Very good saturation combined with filter in the first one, and really a typical sound for the second one. Just try them. I like them. They don't sound like anything else, really. Next, my frequency spectrum analyzer is by default still the Blue Cat Audio. It's free, and I either use that or the analyzer on Pro Q2. And lastly, I don't remember if I covered this category, but for stereo manipulation, it's the old S1 for simple stereo widening or narrowing the material. But more often than that, I use this one to pan stereo sources left and right while keeping them stereo. And I usually automate the position to make interesting movements inside the mix. I'm pretty sure I showed you this in a previous video. Then my favorite stereo manipulation tool for serious work is the Ozone Imager. Great for stereoizing as well as widening or narrowing individual bands, since it has a multi-band function. This can be used literally on anything stereo, either to enhance or create. It's just a great plugin. And I feel like it's one of the few that maintains somehow phase coherence. Even when widening the kind of mid-low range, it still retains somehow some monocompatibility. That's my feeling. I just like how it sounds. And the last one I'm still testing and liking at the moment, we've seen it in the first video, is the Waves Motion. I like this very much. I feel it's the perfect mix between easy of use and features for a panner, and I like the stereo effects you can get out of it, and quickly too. So it's becoming one of my favorites. But that's a wrap. This is it for this video, guys. I hope you liked it and I hope it was useful. But please, like never before, on this one, I want to hear your favorites. I'm so focused on mixing that I feel like there's a lot of strange, weird plugins out there that are probably more common and known to composers and producers, and I'd love for you guys to tell me your favorites and what you use them for, and steal some of your secrets. So if you like the video, please don't forget to click a like button. If you have any question, leave it in the comment down below or post on the new community page here on YouTube. That's the best place to post your questions, to which I will answer in vlogs, videos, or Q&As. Join us on Facebook and Twitter and get all the news about the channel, upcoming videos and series, and access to exclusive content. Please keep supporting MixBuzzTV by visiting the store, sharing the videos, and spreading the word on blogs, forums, social media. Subscribe, click the bell icon if you haven't already. See you next time.